Isaiah 11:12 says, "He shall set up an ensign for the nations, and shall assemble the outcasts of Israel, and gather together the dispersed of Judah from the four corners of the earth." When the outcasts of Israel are assembled, and the dispersed of Judah have been gathered, we will bring you that story. Until then, the Lamb Network will gather news from these same four corners and bring them to you, all with the Messianic perspective and all from Messianic believers. Shalom, and welcome to the Lamb Network's Four Corners Weekly News. My name is Rabbi Darryl Weinberg. Thank you for joining us. This episode will cover events that took place around this planet through March 7th, 2019. Here are those stories. In world news, there is a serious leak from joint chief meeting between the US and Russia in Austria. For more on this story, here's Lamb's own John Craig.
Well, for the world news, we've got a headline reading, "Serious leak from joint chief meeting between U.S. and Russia in Austria." This was also taken from the HowTurnerRadioShow.com. And this is kind of an interesting development as well. An unusual and very serious leak of information has taken place after a meeting in Austria between the top generals of the U.S. and Russia. Well, who was over there? Well, we got General Joseph F. Dunford Jr., who met with the chief of Russian General Staff, General Valery Gerasimov, and that was over in Austria. That was dated March the 5th. Well, they're discussing a deconfliction of coalition Russian operations in Syria, so they got a lot of things they're talking about. Main thing is how do they do their operations without getting in trouble with each other? So among the key topics is how to improve operational safety and strategic stability between the U.S. and Russian militaries. Also, the importance of maintaining regular communication to avoid any type of miscalculation and to promote transparency and deconfliction in areas where our militaries are operating in close proximity. Well, in this report, we find out that the Russian military expressed grave concern to the U.S. generals about what Russia sees as the greatest existential threat to Russia. What is that? If radical socialists in the United States take power in the upcoming elections. If that should happen, the Russian generals told the U.S. that they would immediately call for an all-out nuclear attack on America before these socialists do the same to Russia. Well, after all, I mean, Russia did live through how many decades of socialism, communism, and now the radicals in America want to bring what happened in Russia to this nation, and they're like, we don't want to have anything to do with that, and we will make us first strike because we will not succumb to that type of tyranny again. Well, that's my opinion, but going on here in the article, it says the Russian generals made clear that radical socialists inside the U.S. have already stated they intend to declare war on Russia for the made-up crime of interfering in their 2016 presidential election. Yeah, what is, well, I guess it's hysterical. Hysterical? Well, it is kind of hysterical because that is what mainstream media and the fake news and they've been pushing, and this whole Russian collusion and the whole attacks on President Trump over the last 2 years have all been based on the fact that President Trump must have colluded with the Russians, or he must have gotten money from them, or he must be doing something behind the scenes, because after all, how could President Trump actually ever have been elected president over their choice of Hillary Clinton? Well, maybe the American people wanted President Trump and not Hillary Clinton. But the source also says that U.S. generals expressed their belief President Trump will be reelected in 2020 because he is directly confronting the socialist menace in the USA, and the American people know their freedom would vanish under a socialist government. Well, that let's pray that that holds true all the way through the 2020 elections. We got a long ways to go before we get there.
Thanks, John. Thousands of Christians packed the Camping World Stadium in Orlando, Florida, and live streamed the event in thousands of churches across the United States, all part of a new Jesus movement. For religious news and more on this story, here's our very own Mark David Smith.
Thanks, Rabbi. Mark David Smith. On Saturday, February 23rd, 2019, a Christian evangelistic extravaganza called Descend finally came to fruition. Coordinated by evangelist Lou Engle, Youth with a Mission, which is YWAM, and other ministries, the event came together a little over a year after the death of Reverend Billy Graham. I couldn't personally find a total attendance number, though it's reported to have reached in the thousands for this 12-hour event. Some say that over 500 people accepted Jesus, or Yeshua from our perspective, during the event. It was reported that one of the main speakers, Todd White, a reformed drug addict and former professed atheist, proclaimed that every Christian wants to do more, they just don't know how. Christians want to do more, they just don't know how. What? Christians are the greatest evangelical religion that's ever graced this planet. Grace. Why do we as Messianics need to know about this story? As with all things in love and war, there is a sense of balance when it comes to evangelism. Can you tell someone why your lifestyle is better than theirs? Can you tell someone why your Messiah is better than their Christ, better than their prophet, better than their guru? Is your Messiah better? Can you tell someone using their culture so that they understand why do they need to live a Torah-based lifestyle? Does everybody? Do you love Jesus, Yeshua? Can you tell people why? Mark David Smith.
This is exactly what the world needs, is more Jesus on a grand scale like that. Thanks, Mark. The vision and mission of the Besor Institute is to help increase understanding among the members of the body of Messiah. We'll be right back after this message.
We did a survey at the end of the class, and the students were just so excited about the class. They said, we never knew all this stuff, and that just made the Bible come alive. They was just knowing from a Judeo-Christian perspective, why did Jesus say this, and why did the Pharisees, why were they acting like this? And they said it just really opened their minds, and they were so excited about the class.
And we had one guy, and when he came into the class, he was a little cynical, like, why do I even need to know this? But his wife wanted to come, and, you know, all this kind of stuff. But it was just funny because he, halfway through the class, he goes, you know, I was in a men's Bible study, and I'm sitting here looking at this scripture we're supposed to read, and all I could think of was, wonder what this means in Hebrew. Wonder what was meant by this. What is the bigger application to this?
Another story in religion news is Jack Phillips is vindicated by overwhelming evidence of hostility toward religion. The court case has been dropped. Here's John Craig.
Well, I've got some good news over here in the Faith in the News section, and this is breaking, is what the headline reads. This has been reported by Benjamin Gill over at CBN News. It says, Christian baker Jack Phillips is vindicated by overwhelming evidence of hostility toward religion. Court case dropped. And this is reported from Denver, Colorado, where the Alliance Defending Freedom is reporting that the Colorado Civil Rights Commission has decided to drop its transgender case against Christian baker Jack Phillips. Well, who is Jack Phillips? Well, he made the news where he had to take his case all the way to the Supreme Court when he said this is anti-religious harassment, when he was confronted about making a cake for a homosexual wedding. And then he was brought under fire again. Once that case was resolved over the Supreme Court, then they brought another case against him where it says that because of his religious beliefs, it prevented him from creating a cake that celebrated a transgender transition. An attorney had targeted Phillips with the transgender cake. The same attorney later asked Phillips to also design a cake with satanic themes and images. Can we talk about just a setup and harassment of this gentleman? So the U.S. Supreme Court had already ruled in the previous case that was brought against Phillips by the CCRC that governments and state officials cannot show religious hostility and in their decisions. And so the state of Colorado, by the way, they decided that they weren't going to follow the Supreme Court, and with their same bias decided to go after him again with hostility towards his beliefs. I mean, after all, 6.5 years, that's how long Jack had been defending his case. And then he was tied up again with more court hearings and all of the ramifications that go along with going to court. And so it says Jack's victory is great news for everyone. Tolerance and respect for good faith differences of opinion are essential in a diverse society like ours, Wagner continued. But the states demonstrated an ongoing hostility toward Jack because of his belief and his beliefs is undeniable. And here's some things that the one commissioner said. He had already been exposed for calling Phillips a hater on Twitter. And then a former commissioner, Diane Rice, had called religious freedom, quote, a despicable piece of rhetoric, unquote. And that's what prompted the U.S. Supreme Court to rule against the Colorado Commission for its anti-religious bigotry. Well, the lawyers for the ADF representing Phillips uncovered more statements from a 2018 public meeting in which two commissioners voiced support for those comments. One of the commissioners, for example, is Carol Fabrizio, said, quote, I also very much stand behind Commissioner Rice's statements. I was actually proud of what she said, and I agree with her. I'm almost glad that something the commissioner said ended up public and used because I think it was the right thing, unquote. With that anti-religious sentiment exposed, the prosecutor is dropping the case against Jack. It's about time. And so getting the message that this anti-religious hostility has no place in our country, the state's decision to target Jack has cost him more than 6.5 years of his life, forcing him to spend that time tied up in legal proceedings. And Representative or the senior counsel, Jim Campbell, added, he shouldn't be driven out of business just because some people disagree with his religious beliefs and his desire to live consistently with them. We look forward to the day when Jack doesn't have to fear government punishment for his faith or harassment from people who oppose his beliefs. Well, I think that's true for every one of us. And I think that this is something we need to be aware of because it wasn't just Jack's case. It was also some bakers over there in Oregon that had to face a negative outcome on a particular case where they were being forced to make a cake for a homosexual wedding. And, you know, everybody, just because of their hostility and thinking that they should have certain rights, should not replace the rights of others to make decisions for their own businesses.
Thanks, John. In U.S. news, the GOP and Democrats are lobbying to import twice as many low-skilled foreign workers as they've done before. Here's John Craig with more on that story.
Well, over here at the U.S. national news, we got an interesting headline. I think you might be wondering, perhaps, why are our young people and young adults that are graduating from high school and college, why are they having such difficulty finding a job? Well, here's a headline, and this is from Breitbart.com, and it says GOP/Democrats lobby to import twice as many low-skilled foreign workers. Well, this is an article by Evan Avucci, and it says a coalition of Republican and Democrat senators is lobbying the Department of Homeland Security Secretary Kirstjen Nielsen to more than double the number of low-skilled foreign workers that businesses can import to take blue-collar American jobs. Yeah, did I just say that? Yes, they are both, the Republicans and Democrats, want more unskilled workers, foreign workers, to come in to take blue-collar American jobs. Well, according to this article, 11 Republicans and Democrat senators, including Senators Susan Collins, Republican of Maine, and Angus King, I think that is independent from Maine, are seeking to convince Nielsen to once again increase the number of the H-2B foreign workers who are admitted every season to take U.S. jobs that would otherwise go to young and working class Americans. Every year, U.S. companies are allowed to import 66,000 low-skilled H-2B foreign workers to take blue-collar, non-agricultural jobs. For some time, the H-2B visa programs have been used by businesses to bring in cheaper foreign workers and has contributed to blue-collar Americans having their wages undercut. Yeah, some parents are wondering when their kids are going to move out of their basements. Well, maybe if we can get some things changed, maybe their wages won't be undercut and they can get their own place. Well, this letter by the coalition of Republicans and Democrats asked Nielsen to more than double the number of H-2B foreign workers to 135,320 for the business lobby. Pro-American immigration reformers worry Nielsen will listen to the business lobby and political establishment's cry for cheaper foreign workers for their corporate donors. Nielsen and her close ally John Kelly have consistently increased the H-2B visa cap for the past 2 years against the will of President Trump's Buy American, Hire American policy. Sounds like we need to be giving President Trump's office there at the White House a call, or get on his website and send an email and comment and say, why is this being considered? And are you going to set Miss Nielsen, who is an appointed official, not elected, are you going to put her under the gun to follow your policy, or are you going to allow her to be pressured to follow the fall under the pressure of these Republican and Democrat senators? I mean, after all, these H-2B jobs and these workers coming in are undercutting salaries, and they're taking jobs away from these unskilled Americans. I mean, after all, shouldn't our unskilled children have the opportunity to learn some skills, to get out there, to work, to be able to build up for a career in their own futures? Here it goes on and says that that a study this year reveals widespread U.S. wage suppression for Americans in occupation prone to H-2B visas. Every 1% increase in the immigrant composition of American workers' occupations reduces their weekly wages by about 0.5%. So in other words, increase the immigrants, reduce the wages. Researcher Stephen Camarada has found this means the average native-born American worker today has his weekly wage reduced by perhaps 8.5% because of current legal immigration levels. In a state like Florida, where immigrants make up about 25.4% of the labor force, American workers have their weekly wages reduced by perhaps more than 12.5%. In California, immigrants make up 34% of the labor force, and we're talking both legal and illegal workers and immigrants. Americans, therefore, their weekly wages are reduced by potentially 17%. Think about that in the high cost of living out there in California. Well, in total, there are roughly 1.5 million foreign workers in U.S. college graduate jobs, plus at least 300,000 blue-collar or manual labor jobs. Meanwhile, there are 5.4 million Americans who are not in the labor force who want a job, with more than 425,000 Americans saying they are discouraged by their job prospects. Hey, why not give some of our representatives in Congress and in the Senate a phone call this week and say, hey, what are you doing to preserve the right for our children and our grandchildren to go out there and work? By the way, this report's by John Binder for Breitbart News, and he follows up by saying every year America's working and middle class have their wages reduced by an inflow of more than 1.5 million, mostly low-skilled foreign workers who are admitted to the country. This importation of illegal and legal foreign workers has left the country's bottom line of workers with stagnant wages since the 1970s and has forced them to compete with foreign workers for blue-collar jobs. That's it for the U.S. national news for now.
In more U.S. news, as of March 6th, according to ABC News, there have been 23 confirmed killed, some of them children, after the deadliest U.S. tornado in nearly 6 years ripped through a rural Alabama community on Sunday, March 3rd. Here's Lamb Network's Mark David Smith coming from Tornado Alley. Let's hear what he has to say.
Thanks, Rabbi Darryl. Shalom, everybody. I'm Mark David Smith. President Donald Trump is planning to visit that area on Friday, March 8th. The tornado was an F4, packing winds estimated at 170 miles an hour, and chewed a path of destruction up to 9/10 of a mile wide in Alabama for nearly 27 miles. The National Weather Service said 90 people were injured. Ahead of a visit to the area planned for Friday, President Donald Trump said it's been a tragic situation, but a lot of good work is being done there. The president says he's been in regular touch with the governors of Alabama and Georgia. Trump has declared that a major disaster exists in Alabama and ordered federal aid to supplement state and local recovery efforts in Lee County. In a news release Tuesday, the Trump administration said assistance can include grants for temporary housing and home repairs, low-cost loans to cover uninsured property losses, and other programs to help individuals and business owners recover from the disaster. Damage assessments are continuing, and more counties with additional forms of assistance may be designated after those surveys are completed. In a related story, also from ABC News, the youngest victim was 6, the oldest 93. One family lost 10 members. The 23 people killed in the nation's deadliest tornado in nearly 6 years came into focus Tuesday when the coroner said identifying them and when the coroner finished identifying them and released their names. Just keep those families in your prayers, Lee County Coroner Bill Harris said 2 days after the disaster. It's a tragic situation. I grew up in Kansas and lived for a few years in Oklahoma. My family has seen several tornadoes. As a matter of fact, we lived just 2 miles south of the May 20th, 2013 tornado that devastated Moore, Oklahoma, and was definitely one of the biggest tornadoes ever. Just 10 days later, the widest tornado ever recorded at about a mile wide went through very close to the same area as the one on May 20th. I can remember in the year 2000, that on Passover night, my hometown was hit by an F4 tornado, and my parents lost their house. There is major devastation with these types of storms, and the biggest difference is you don't have warning. There is no warning. You know the season, you know when it could show up, and you prepare, you're ready. But you, especially if you live in an area where it normally gets these type of storms, you do prepare. It's the same thing in our lives. Devastating things can happen at a moment's notice. We have to prepare. As people that serve God, we need to be ready for devastating things, whether it's physical or spiritual. Be ready for something to happen and be prayed up. Serve God and be ready for anything. Thank you very much. Mark David Smith.
Mark? According to Wikipedia, there are 22 wars going on around the world at any given time, and it looks like there may be more brewing. There's a large U.S. military gear buildup beginning in Romania. Why? Let's let John Craig tell us. John?
For the World at War news, we have large U.S. military gear buildup begins in Romania. And the question is why. This was taken from the HalTurnerRadioShow.com. And this was actually dated on March the 3rd, but I think this is quite relevant for what's going on today. A trainload of U.S. Abrams tanks, military helicopters, and more have arrived in Romania. A lot of people are asking why. The march toward an utterly massive war, likely against Russia, seems to be continuing as a trainload of U.S. Abrams main battle tanks arrived in Romania. Well, with the tanks came the helicopters, which include Chinooks and the Apaches and Black Hawk helicopters, all of that. And what's so significant about this and why Romania? Well, close to Romania is Ukraine. And there's been a lot of trouble between Europe and Russia over who will control Ukraine. Europe is not giving up and is using U.S. military might to set the stage for a battle royale with Russia over Ukraine. Of course, no one in Europe or the U.S. is talking about any such direct military conflict. Yet, while they're not talking, they're very much doing. So let's keep an eye on what's going on over there in Russia, over there in Romania, over there in Ukraine, because this buildup is quite significant. And let's keep our eyes open for that. It looks like the U.S. and Europe intend to wage actual war upon Russia. Of course, it's not going to happen right away because everything requires a buildup, but it's very significant. Events are taking place over there, something that we do not want to lose sight of. And I have this question, and this is what Hal Turner brings up, is that the most glaring example of our government's not doing what we, the people, want, but instead are undertaking the agenda of someone else. Well, whoever that someone else is, it needs to be stopped because millions of lives depend on it. Well, so let's keep an eye on that and let's see where that goes.
Thanks, John. In political news, more rhinos, Republicans in name only, caving in on climate change hoax. It's just not worth the fight anymore. For more on this story, John Craig.
Well, we've got some politics in the news involving climate change. Well, here's the headline: more rhinos. And we're not talking about rhinos over in Africa or at your local city zoos. It says more rhinos. That's talking about Republican in name only. They're caving in on climate change hoax. Yeah, it's just not worth the fight anymore, according to one Republican. And this is taken from the nationalsentinel.com, written by John Doherty. So what's being reported here? Well, it says one policy area where conservatives could still count on most Republicans to stand firm and resist leftist Democratic efforts. Well, it's in the so-called climate change arena. Used to be a solidly GOP establishment position, but that resistance appears to be cracking. It says more Republicans are beginning to embrace the climate science, claiming the human activity is disrupting the Earth's weather and climate patterns to the detriment of everyone on the planet. Dun, dun, dun. Yeah, that's my additional cynical view of that type of climate science, which I would call in the neighborhood of fake science. But that's a whole nother subject. At this point in time, what we're seeing is that Representative John Shimkus, Republican of Illinois, he used to forcefully push back against all allegations of human-caused climate change by invoking the Bible and declaring that Earth will only end when God declares it's time to be over. Well, seems to be a pretty good stance right there, and yet he's now taken a defeatist attitude. He's obviously worn down by the left's never-ending push to factor climate change into public policy. He says it's just not worth the fight anymore in an interview with Bloomberg, and he says, let's just see what we can do to address it and not hurt the economy. Oh my goodness. You know, where my thoughts are on this is that it seems like the left, when they push an agenda, and definitely climate change is very much a left-leaning agenda. Actually, it's more than left-leaning. It is like way out there on the left-hand side. But what's the purpose of taking something far out to the left? Well, it's to take those who are in the middle of the road or even on the right and bring them to the left with them. Seems to me anymore that those people that are considered conservatives in the Congress are leaning much more left than even John F. Kennedy. In fact, I think he would probably sit back and think about the horrors of what American politics has actually become. Well, that's my opinion. Let's go on and see what Bloomberg further noted. He says that Shimkus is among a number of Republicans who are scrambling to confront the science they once rejected. They are planning hearings on the issue, pledging to invest in technologies to mitigate its impact and openly talk about the need for taking action. In fact, the Yale program on climate change communication says the shift in posture follows the public growing anxiety after catastrophic hurricanes, flooding, and wildfires linked to global warming. In fact, they're saying fully 74% of registered voters think global warming is happening, and 67% said they are worried about it. Well, among conservative Republicans, according to their poll, just 42% think global warming is happening, but that's up 5 percentage points since the poll was taken in 2017. So what are we saying here? I think Representative Shimkus, along with a number of other Rhino Republicans, are actually just simply putting their finger in the wind and saying, which way is that wind blowing? Because they certainly don't want to be too off from what the public has been indoctrinated to believe. In fact, wasn't it Adolf Hitler who said, if you say a lie enough times, I'm going to paraphrase it, then the people will eventually begin to believe it. So I think that's what's going on here. It says, moreover, Democrats, this is from the Bloomberg article being quoted, moreover, Democrats have seized the issue with populist fever, even proposing a sweeping plan to phase out climate warming gas emissions through a Green New Deal. Members are openly using the term climate change, leading Rhino Senator Lisa Murkowski of Alaska said. And you're not seeing this kind of dismissive attitude, but more open conversations about some of the challenges, some of the technologies we can look to, some of the solutions. So Murkowski is from the great state of Alaska, where oil production is the top industry. And she's been a long believer of human-caused climate change. According to Bloomberg, it says, in addition to Murkowski, other Republicans have been meeting in small groups to come up with a strategy on the issue. Senators John Cornyn of Texas, Cory Gardner of Colorado, Susan Collins of Maine, Bill Cassidy of Louisiana, Tom Tillis of North Carolina, Rob Portman of Ohio, Lindsey Graham of South Carolina, and former 2012 presidential nominee, the junior senator from Utah, Mitt Romney. Now, why did I say all those names? Because if you're from one of those states, you probably want to contact your senator and tell them and give them a piece of your mind about what is going on here. I think they have some explaining to do. According to Graham, who said he's been discussing the issue with freshman #NeverTrump Senator Romney, there is a growing consensus on our side that man-made emissions are contributing to global warming. That's the Green Deal. That the Green Deal is absurd, but we should be able to find a more appropriate solution to the problem. So push it left, and anybody to the right of that's going to come along with you. So the key is kick the can a little bit further down the road, because the further it goes, the more people you're going to be getting closer to your way of thinking. I think that's what Ocasio or Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez would sure want the people to do, since she's been funded, by the way, for the last couple years, where she started a PAC. You just kind of thought she showed up. No, she's been doing a little bit more than being a bartender before she was elected there in her district in New York. By the way, Miss Ocasio-Cortez, have you actually opened up an office in your district like you're supposed to? Just thinking. All right, so going back to this article, the problem is, of course, that the so-called science is anything but settled. And the climate doom and gloom predictions of 30 years have been bogus and alarmist. Ocasio-Cortez, if you remember, she says, we only have 12 years. Yeah, 12 years. So the sky is falling, according to her, where she wants to rebuild every building in America. I think that's like over 100 million structures that would need to be built and made green, along with a number of other things. But it says, and the climate doom and gloom prediction of 30 years have been bogus and alarmist. But apparently, if the left can beat a dead horse long enough, they can get what they want in terms of action on this issue. Well, I want to ask this question. When was the last time that any of the so-called Republicans in Congress actually ever owned an issue, and they weren't just being led by the nose by the Democrats or those left-leaning rhinos? I think someone needs to get some backbone. Someone needs to stand up. Someone needs to actually, maybe they'll have some hearings, but they'll actually bring out real science, and maybe they'll start changing their narrative. Well, that's what wishful thinking is. But anyway, contact your representatives. Get the news out. Homeschool your kids. I mean, after all, if you want your kids to know the right thing, maybe it's time to get our kids and our grandkids into private school or homeschool so they can actually learn the truth and actually learn something. Well, those are my thoughts on this article and what's going on.
You know that the Lamb Network prays for you 6 days a week? Let's let Susan Hooge tell you more about this. Susan?
We have 6 war rooms, manned with 10 warriors of the kingdom of God and 4 warrior coaches. And everyone is suited up with the ultimate armor, a full armor of the Lord with all the warrior gear, such as the belt of truth that's buckled around their waist, the breastplate of righteousness that's put in place. Their feet are fitted with the readiness that comes from the gospel of peace. They've got the shield of faith with which that they can extinguish all the flaming arrows of the evil one. And the helmet of salvation is fitted firmly on their heads with the sword of the Spirit, which is the word of God. They are always ready at the drop of a lightning bolt to get and to go into battle for you, your family, your friends, the kingdom of God. And until the next emergency, we'll gather 6 days a week live on YouTube in the War Room, ready and willing to go to war for you, your family, your friends, the kingdom of God.
We are ready to pray for you. Click on prayer requests and praise reports at the top of the MessianicLambRadio.com webpage. Send us your prayer requests and praise reports. We'll pray over them the next day. Now, speaking of prayer, this subject always needs prayer. For our Right to Life segment and a story on how a court grants unborn baby legal rights, once again, our own John Craig.
Well, we've got some good news over on the pro-life news front. After all, some things have been happening over there in the great state of Alabama. According to WorldNet Daily, the court grants unborn baby legal rights. Can you believe that? This case marks the first time in United States history something like this taking place. Well, what happened? Well, an aborted baby for the first time in the United States has been recognized to have legal rights because an Alabama man is suing a clinic for providing an abortion to a woman he says was pregnant with his baby, and he petitioned a probate judge to allow him to represent the unborn child's estate. Think about that. That was reported by WHNT TV in Huntsville, Alabama. So this probate judge, Frank Barger, signed off on the petition by Ryan Magers, who claimed to be the father of baby Roe. And so Barger's decision marks the first time an aborted, now they use the word fetus, I would say child, has been recognized to have legal rights. This is really big news. And this petition was filed on January 25th, 2019. And baby Roe is not specifically referred to as a fetus. So that's a good thing as well. So Magers did not want the woman to have an abortion, which took place on February 12, 2017. Magers, who is seeking a jury trial, said he wanted to keep the baby, but the mother wanted an abortion, the lawsuit claims. So last October, WorldNet Daily reported the Alabama Supreme Court ruled that an unborn baby is a person under the law. Wow, that is a big deal and very, very good news. Further, in a special concurrence, Alabama Supreme Court Justice Tom Parker called on the U.S. Supreme Court to revisit Roe versus Wade, that 1973 ruling that struck down laws prohibiting abortion in all 50 states. So this is a big deal, and I think I'm waiting to see how this one turns out, considering what's happened over in New York, where they were gleefully applauding the fact that they can kill babies up to the date of delivery. And then West Virginia, or not West Virginia, but the Virginia governor coming out, who is, by the way, a medical doctor, came out and said, you know what, sometimes abortions are botched. He didn't quite use those terms, but what he did say is that when a baby does happen to be born, when an abortion failed, that they can keep the baby comfortable while the mother and the doctors have a little conference on what they are to do from there. Well, of course, one of the big things that I didn't mention in last week's report concerning that is that these doctors sure like to think about body parts and a lot of other elements that are within the baby that they would rather sell off to the highest bidder and to these big contracts that they make and make some money off of that child that was just murdered. Of course, they can keep that baby alive. They can keep the organs alive. And one of the things that they are looking at right now is even harvesting the blood of that infant so that they can use it to inject as some fountain of youth for certain elite. Well, another thing they're trying to harvest out of those babies is a substance called adrenochrome. And adrenochrome is a natural substance that's found inside these infants, and they harvest that to give them a high. Think about that. They want to use our babies, these babies that are being aborted, for their own personal high and longevity.
Thanks, John. Have you heard of the Momo Alert? If you have children or friends and family who have children, you might want to pause this and gather them up. Here is Susan Hooge to help you understand this alarming story in our social media news segment.
Thanks, Darryl. There is a sinister challenge that is popping up on the internet, encouraging children and others of a vulnerable mental state to do harm to themselves and to others. The Momo Challenge, as it is called, first appeared on WhatsApp and is described as a suicide challenge. It is easily recognized by a creepy humanoid avatar with dark, stringy hair, pale skin with oversized mouth, and bulging eyes. Anyone who accesses the link to Momo will eventually be sent images and instructions on how to harm themselves and others. It has been reported that at least 3 children have died this past year due to the Momo Challenge. 1 was in South America and 2 in India, while a 4th child in the Ukraine was saved by doctors after she overdosed on pills. Clearly, this is a worldwide problem. The whole concept of online guidance for suicide and harming oneself is not new. Back in 2016, another challenge called Blue Whale encouraged people in a similar manner and resulted in multiple suicides in Russia and in the US. Yet the Momo Challenge is purported to be a hoax without a real online presence at all. With that realization, it is clear that this challenge is of a reverse nature. Instead of purposely going after the vulnerable, as did Blue Whale, this challenge preys upon the fears of parents and their overarching desire to protect their children from the invasions via the internet. Parents know that the internet is the one vulnerable and at times uncontrollable aspect of child raising. So having something like this show up does cause immediate alarm. Parents have been talking with their children about this dangerous challenge, much in the same manner as parents would do for drugs, alcohol, and smoking. And that is what the Momo Challenge is banking on, that it's spread by word of mouth from the very people who are supposed to be the protectors. Police and children's services worldwide have been putting out warning statements concerning both angles. More specifically, not to play the suicide challenge, as well as warning parents not to fall into this trap of unknowingly spreading this very challenge. On February 28th of this year, the Ontario Provincial Police in Canada put out a well-worded statement on Twitter that addresses both aspects. It says, "Parent alert. Whether real or a hoax, the disturbing Momo challenge asking kids to potentially put their lives in danger has popped up again. Use this opportunity to educate on being safe online and that seeing is not always believing." At the same time, Miami-Dade police in Florida issued their own warning on Twitter and have included a link to the National OnlineSafety.com website, which equips school staff, parents, and students with the knowledge they need to understand online dangers. People may be wondering, what does the name Momo mean? Well, it's an acronym, an abbreviation, or slang to mean annoying person or idiot. If a person is playing the Momo challenge and does not fulfill the challenge's levels, they are then called a Momo, an idiot. Of course, this is yet another aspect to the whole Momo influence, and people may very well inflict harm on themselves or others to supposedly wipe away the label of being an idiot. How can we educate our children about safe online usage? Again, check out the National Online Safety website. Also, an experienced beta tester for WhatsApp has the following advice. 1. Block any number sending you unsolicited links. And this can happen on any chatting platform. If at all possible, use your own internet and Wi-Fi, because public Wi-Fi is the easiest way for someone to hack your system and potentially install this challenge without your knowledge. 2. If Momo is on your device, don't follow what it says. And don't worry about the consequences of not following what it says, because the maximum action that Momo can do to you is send you a violent image to your phone number, which you don't need to open and you can easily delete. 3. A good preventative strategy involves installing apps only from Google Play Store. And 4, if your phone is hacked, the cure is to format it fully. If you need help with formatting, contact someone you know who is tech savvy and can format the phone properly. From a biblical perspective, it comes down to parents following the advice of Proverbs 22, verse 6, which we all know. Train up a child in the way that he or she should go, and when he or she is old, they will not depart from it. More than at any other time in human history, parents really need to be involved in the daily lives of their children. But sadly, this is not the case for the majority of people. Fractured families, stressed families, overworked families are all part of the new culture of our current age, resulting in vulnerable children and young adults, all who become easy targets for insidious online games as Momo and Blue Whale. These two specific attacks may be stopped for now, but the whole concept will show up again in the future in some other way. Therefore, by starting as early as you can with the education of proper online usage, it works to the advantage of the child and the parents as the child grows into teenage years and beyond. For Four Corners Weekly News, I'm Susan Hooge.
Thanks, Susan. As a parent, this is truly terrifying, and I encourage everybody to take this seriously. Did you know that there are 11 states in the U.S. who have totally legalized marijuana? Not sure about yours? You might want to check out DISA.com to know more about the status of your state. But please don't do that until after our newscast is done. Right now, our Lamb's own Jamie Louie would like to talk about a form of medical marijuana. Dr. Jamie?
All right, friends, it's Sunday, the 3rd day of March in the year of our Lord 2019, and I'm here once again with Dr. Jamie. But Dr. Jamie, you know, I found an article, or I think it might have been Edith that actually sent me the article late last night about the hemp authority, the U.S. Hemp Authority. They recently came out and listed 13 top companies in the hemp industry that are actually doing it right as far as regulatory compliance, you know, truth in advertising as far as what's in the product, et cetera, et cetera. And that was a pretty powerful article. I sent that to you, Dr. Jamie, and then I know you wanted to get on here and say a few words about what transpired after you saw that.
And in the article, I could actually put it on my phone, and I could save it, so I could have all the information about the 13 companies and what they had to go through, which was over, I think it was 20,000 different companies they researched. It was quite a few, and they only found 13 that met the standards of the 2014 Farm Bill and all the regulations they've been putting on the cannabis and the hemp industry, the federal government. And this research team just did tremendous amounts of work. And of course, as you said, they had our company as one of the top standards of the industry. Well, that got me so excited. When I saw that, I said, you know, I've heard that hemp is not only, you know, good for so many things, and I've seen the hemp revolution. It's like a tsunami starting right now economically for the country, that it got me excited, because I love the Bible. I said, it's got to be in the Bible. So I looked up the most renowned plant in the Bible, and I found this article, and I found these verses, and I went completely just bananas. I read all these articles about what hemp does and how it was used biblically. It was used for food, it was used for medicine, it was used, Yeshua talked about it, Jesus talked about it. This product is the most renowned plant in the entire Bible. Now, to me, that went, wow. So God's made something available like this that has been hid from us, especially since 1937 in America, which this plant has been around for 6,000 years. They've hid it from us so that we can't benefit with our cannabinoid system. The entire cannabinoid system, I didn't even know anything about the endocannabinoid system, and neither did very many people. That system runs all our other systems. It's the conductor. And when you figure out that God made that plant for food for his people, for the people of the Bible, man, that's exciting to me. That makes me that much higher motivated to share it with people. I used to think hemp was bad because of all the publicity, the MSN, all the different networks that I've watched, how bad it was. Now we have to re-educate people and let them know the truth about how good hemp is.
Well, this newfound knowledge, I saw when I first saw you this morning, you seemed to have an extra spring in your step. You seemed a little bit more motivated. So this really had an impact on you last night in the middle of the night when you got into the Bible and started learning this. You really didn't know it, did you?
No, I did not. Well, I'd heard the renowned subject, that the Bible, that the plant was the most renowned, you know, because people love to tell you that kind of stuff. I found it. And if anybody wants to write me, they can write Jamie, J-M-E-L-O-U-I-S 75 at gmail.com. That's J-M-E-L-O-U-I-S 75 at gmail.com, and I'll send you the articles and I'll send you the information. And if you're interested in getting involved, this company's on a ride. You can check it out, and I'll be glad to assist you. And then we'll all be with Steve on the magnificent Steve Motley Crew, the team that's going to be the #1 with this company. And we're going to be the #1 recruiting of this company, bringing people from all over involved with us to help people, help them with all kinds of problems.
Dr. Jamie, go ahead and give out your website, your HempWorks website.
Is if you go to HempWorks, HempWorks.com/DRJME. You'll come to my replicated website, which will get you in if you want to buy the product or if you'd like to be a part of it, and then I'd be directly related to you, where we can talk on the phone, we can do Skype, we can do Zoom, and I can help you build your team.
Well, thanks a lot, Dr. Jamie. I appreciate your time. Bye-bye.
Thank you, Steve.
For our last report, forgive us, Lord, if we should ever forget Israel. There's a United Nations report that accuses Israel of war crimes. Let's hear what James and AviGayle O'Hare have to say.
Thank you, Darryl. Tonight's update for the Israel update comes from breakingisraelnews.com. The article is called UN Accuses Israel of War Crimes, while Hamas-led attacks on border intensify.
Yes, and there's nothing new under the sun when it comes to this type of accusations and just coming against Israel. It's again, you read these reports, James, and it gets tiring, because they just cannot, when I say they, meaning the United Nations, cannot deal with the fact that Israel exists.
Did you know that the UN, you know what that stands for? That stands for usually negative.
Yes.
Against Israel. And that is so true, because they are a body that should be disbanded. It is anti-Semitic to the core and anti-American to the core. And so I want to read a scripture out of Isaiah. It says, "The cry, violence, shall no more be heard in your land, nor rack and ruin within your border. And you shall name your walls victory, and your gates renown." That's from Isaiah 60, verse 18, from the Israeli Bible.
Now that's a report that we can believe. That's the report we should believe. But when you see this type of a report saying a United Nations report released on Thursday claimed Israeli soldiers were guilty of war crimes when firing at Hamas led rioters rushing the security fence separating Israel from Gaza. That is just, talk about fake news. That is not even the character or the integrity of the IDF. It just isn't, And, the commission has reasonable grounds to believe, this is the article that goes on, that during the Great March of Return, Israeli soldiers committed violations of international human rights and humanitarian law, said Argentinian legal expert Santiago Canton, who chaired the UNHRC's Commission of Inquiry into the protests. Some of those violations may constitute war crimes or crimes against humanity and must be immediately investigated. Here we go again. I mean, it's like this accusation, and we can testify that the Israeli Defense Force does not act in that type of manner. Their main objective is to defend Israel.
What's happening right now is that Hamas is organizing riots and at the border of Gaza and Israel. And there's a fence there. And they are coming to the fence and putting women and children up in the front, human shields, if you will. And they are flying balloons with explosives, and they're flying fire kites. So kites with fire, so that it would go into the forests of Israel, the homes of Israel, and burn them down. So you see the evil that is rising up. Hamas, all the Arabs from the Gaza Strip are coming up against Israel. Israel would be a wonderful partner with them if they would concede that Israel should be and is a state and has the land that they have. I mean, remember the Gaza Strip, half of that was in Israel's hands during up until 2005, when the Israelis, Jew against Jew, forcibly ripped them out of their homes that they were there for 30 plus years.
Yes. And, you know, the Prime Minister, Benjamin Netanyahu, said the report reflects the council's obsessive hatred of Israel. Obsessive.
Yes.
Which has been going on for generations. You know, it's one of those areas that it's a spiritual battle. It's been a spiritual battle since it's a battle between Esau, if you will, and Israel. You know, it's one of those Israel battles. If we could just scroll that up a little bit, that'd be great. Thank you. The UN Human Rights Council is setting new records of hypocrisy and lies stemming from its obsessive hatred towards Israel, the only democracy in the Middle East. Israel is the only democracy in the Middle East. And Hamas is the one firing missiles. Now, we've been there. We've been there. We've seen and observed the area of land that was given to the quote unquote Palestinians in the Gaza. They could have used it to set up homes and cultivated it and raise their families. But what do they use it for? Exactly what this says. Firing missiles at Israeli civilians, throwing explosive devices and carrying terrorist activity during demonstrations on the Gaza border. And Netanyahu said, the Prime Minister of Israel says, Israel won't allow Hamas to violate the sovereignty and hurt its citizens. That's what they're defending the citizens. They're defending Israel and will preserve. There's the preservation of life. Yes. Will preserve its right to defend itself. It's a right to defend yourself. The IDF soldiers will continue defending with determination Israeli communities and civilians from Hamas and other terror organizations funded by Iran, which declares its intention to annihilate. See, that's the intention. It's to annihilate Israel. And that was what the Prime Minister of Israel stated. And I am in total agreement.
Amen. Amen. We need to be diligent. We need to be alert. You know, Isaiah says, whose report will we believe? Whose report are you going to believe? We are going to believe the report of Yahweh. His word is headline news. His word is truth. His word is life to us. And so that's the word we're going to bank on. We need to be diligent. We even in America, we have a lot of anti-Semitism rising up in the Congress. We have people that do not like the American way. You know, with AOC and Tlaib and Omar, congresswomen from New York and Minnesota and Detroit, Michigan. So we need to be diligent. We need to not hide our head in the sands, but but be voices and shout out his word and proclaim his goodness on the housetops.
Yes, there's a battle going on. You know, every time we turn around, there's a battle going on. And this is just one of those battles that continues to take place. And it's worth bringing to you because it's happening. It's a reality.
Yes. So thank you for watching and listening to this update. And thank you, Darryl. It's back to you.
Thank you for joining us. Be sure to subscribe to the Messianic Lamb Network YouTube channel. And for more information about shows, broadcasts, show hosts, producers, schedules, what's coming up, what's going down, what's getting back up again, anything and everything you want to know about the Lamb Video Network, go to MessianicLambRadio.com, donate as you are able, sign up for the bi-monthly email updates. I'm Rabbi Darryl Weinberg, and you've been watching the Four Corners Weekly News on the Lamb Video Network. Have a great and restful Shabbat, and we'll see you next week. God bless.